So, welcome to part two of the Frank Little Jr. case. And if you need an introduction, go see part one. Let's jump right into it for the people who are up to speed. So, in 1982, a 16-year-old boy by the name of Jonathan Lawrence discovered the bag of bones behind his mother's factory called the Lauren Corp in Twinsburg. So, I did a little research and I found out that that same factory burned down in 2008, but it still leaves a horrible memory for Mr. Jonathan Lawrence. And strangely enough, he remembers something that could hold the key to who did this to Mr. Little. Lawrence says that he remembers something that had happened the day he found the skeletal remains of Mr. Little. So Mr. Lawrence says he remembers observing an African American male wearing blue overalls dumping a bag out of a 1957 Ford station wagon. At the time, they were used to people coming out and littering. He would just go out there later in the day just to clean up everybody's mess. So later that day, he decided that he was going to go ahead and get started cleaning up the field behind his mother's factory. That's whenever he spots the black bag that the man threw out of his Ford station wagon. He reached down to pick it up, and whenever he did, a skull fell out. His mother ended up calling the police department, and they came out and found more remains. Only half of his body was discovered, and it is assumed that the animals may have gotten to the other portion of his body. So they used the portion of the body that they did have, and they were able to determine that the cause of death was either blunt force trauma or a shotgun, but ultimately his body was dismembered. At the time Frank's skeletal remains were found, the family really didn't believe it could be him because he was known to go MIA all of the time. So no one filed a missing person report. That was until about 40 years later, whenever a cousin came forward having concerns about Little. After speculation that Frank Little may be deceased, his cousin reached out to the police department and was able to get them in touch with Johnny Little, Frank Little's son, to provide a DNA sample. And whenever he did, they were able to identify those skeletal remains as Frank Little's. Johnny said that he wanted the police to look into another cousin of the family. And guess who this man is? The same neighbor and person who owed Little money. The same one he was going to go see that night. Part